Hey guys, welcome back to another art video. So in this video, I'm going to be coloring in a drawing of one of my friends, Gina. She does a lot of voice acting and she actually does have a YouTube. I'll post a link to her channel in the description below. So I'm coloring in this drawing entirely with water-based markers and I really love using them. I'm very surprised that other illustrators don't regularly use water-based markers in their work. So when I was starting to get into markers, I was looking online and I've seen everybody use Copic markers, and there's like a really big craze over Copic markers and everyone keeps raving about it, and I've always wanted them, but obviously I couldn't afford alcohol markers, so I just went with Crayola, RoseArt, and Bic Markets, just what I could afford. And the Bic Markets were actually my favorite because I feel like they replicate alcohol markers a lot in terms of how they lay out color and blend together. So I used to carry around a pack of 14 Bic Markets and I really loved coloring with them and overlaying different colors to create new colors. Even though 14 colors might not seem like a whole lot, I felt like I got a lot of practice with how to use alcohol markers just by using Bic Markets. And they do have, I believe, 36 colors, so it's a really good practice. I feel like they perform very similarly to alcohol markers. Anyway, while I was coloring with my water-based markers, I really liked how they blended. It's a lot different from alcohol markers. It's a little more like cell shading, where you have to worry about shading little areas of the drawing instead of the entire illustration. And there is still a lot of disadvantages with using water-based markers, like paper pilling if you don't wait for the ink to dry while you're layering more colors over each other, and some colors don't tend to blend together even though they're really close in value, so much like alcohol markers would do. And I will say though that having the right paper really helps a lot. Right now I'm using a student grade watercolor paper that sort of feels like it has a smooth glossy coating over it, and I've heard that Tim Holtz also makes a watercolor paper that's meant specifically for their distress markers that works the same way. It sort of has like a glossy coating that prevents the ink from drying right away, and so you can still blend the inks while it's still wet, and I feel like the glossy coating also prevents paper pilling. So having the right paper really does help a lot. And as for the markers, I do have to admit these are more on the expensive side. They were around $1.50 to $2 each, and my alcohol markers range from $3 to $5 each. So it's not that far from the alcohol marker price point, but still pretty cheap in comparison. Anyway, the reason why these markers are a whole lot more expensive than if you were to get like Crayolas or RoseArt is because they have like specialized nibs and also specialized inks. I feel like the ink in these specialty water-based markers doesn't create streaks as you're trying to color in a larger area. So the markers I was using in this illustration were mainly my Zig Art and Graphic twin markers that have a really nice flexible brush tip. My favorite Tim Holtz Distress watercolor markers, which I also like. They have a very inky tip, but it still is very stiff. And a few aqua markers from Letraset I use to color in larger areas. I'm not a big fan of aqua markers because I really don't like their thick brush tip. I really wish they had a thinner and more flexible one, much like the other markers that I was using, but it still has decent ink, I guess. Anyway, I was surprised that other illustrators don't use water-based markers in their work because I really feel that the watercolor effect that water-based markers give your coloring really looks like very attractive, and I feel like a whole lot of artists are just overlooking it because they keep concentrating on alcohol markers. Usually I just see crafters using these watercolor markers to color in their stamped images, and that's fine I guess, but I really wish more illustrators would get into how to use water-based markers. It really gives a different effect because when you overlay alcohol markers over each other, they tend to blend out and the very edge of the color that you just laid down becomes like fuzzy when you overlay colors because one color is starting to bleed into the other, I guess. So it doesn't give you a sharp shadow or a sharp highlight. And you might want that sometimes in your drawing. So that's really where water-based markers shine, because they don't completely blend out from the edges of the colors when you're overlaying new colors. So I was starting to crave that type of shading style, and I started to invest in water-based markers, and I also implement them in my illustrations along with alcohol markers. The technique that I use sort of starts off with laying a base shading with alcohol markers and then going in each section of the drawing with my water-based markers to give more detailed shadings. And that's all I have to say about this video. I just made it to show that water-based markers can still do a decent job of coloring in your illustrations, and you don't have to feel limited if you can only afford water-based markers, because that's still a really great start, and you can still make really detailed shadings and highlights on your colored illustrations. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video.